This is the Subvert, the show where we talk about a smattering of different subject material that you hopefully will loathe, possibly laugh, and maybe even love. I'm Alex Knight. I am joined by Aaron Stewart.
Hello.
And Kristin Rumohr.
Hi, hi.
All right, so what can different cultures teach us about boredom? That is the topic of discussion today. Are you bored right now, people? You got nothing to do?
You're trying to fill that void by listening to us.
Oh, people are definitely filling some kind of void.
We're filling all sorts of voids right now, I think.
That sounds really dirty for some reason.
We are void fillers.
That was exactly how I meant it. So you can take that as you will. Exactly. Finding your voids and filling them. That's our job.
That's right.
That's our new tagline.
Hey, Aaron, come over here for a minute. I'm going to fill your void.
Well, that was the question of what exactly are we filling it with?
Exactly. Well, I don't know what cultures can teach us about boredom. There was an article on the BBC that we're looking at here about how different cultures handle it. I guess the overall question, as a jumping off point, is boredom a good thing? Because clearly with technology, all of us, I mean, you can just see it anywhere you go now. The train, the bus, waiting in the supermarket in line, everyone's faces are glued to their cell phones. They can't help themselves.
Walking across the street.
Yeah, so things can happen. I mean, when you're not, there are downsides to that. When you're not aware of your surroundings, you don't know what's going on. You might step off the curb and get hit by a bus because you were staring at your cell phone and you were so transfixed by what was happening on TikTok or Twitter or whatever social network you prefer these days.
Hey, how are you supposed to memorize that dance if you don't pay attention?
Yeah, I remember, like, I think we're all old enough that we remember what it was like before the internet, before cell phones, before we didn't have stuff that we had in our pocket that would constantly fill every waking moment with some form of distraction or entertainment. When I was growing up, I had to memorize telephone numbers or write them down in a book. And sometimes you were just bored and you would have to find things to do. Or sometimes boredom is a healthy thing. I don't think we necessarily need to fill every single waking moment with some form of information, be it good or bad, right?
Mm-hmm. I think boredom is a necessary thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to give your brain time to actually recover.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And so if you have empty space where you're literally just staring at a wall, that's allowing for a new thought to come in or some form of creativity. Right. If you're constantly filling that you're not giving yourself any chance to come up with something new.
Yeah, absolutely. See, I go back to Mark Twain, who said that time you enjoyed wasting is not wasted time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I mean, that's a slightly hedonistic view, maybe, but, I think it's the idea that, I have a pretty active imagination, right? Like I don't feel, I don't know. My definition of that's the thing. Maybe it's just the definition of boredom that we need to start addressing. Maybe that's the issue, right?
I think it's the ability to be with yourself. It's kind of what boredom ultimately is, right? Those times where you don't have anything, you're just stuck with you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think as Western culture anyways, we've really lost that ability. And that's when you see people constantly going to their phones, right? The second they're alone, it's I need to fill this because I can't be with just me.
Yeah.
Which brings me back to meditation, and I wonder if that might be a beneficial thing for those people specifically in order to just kind of get past this, phone addiction that we all are facing right now. Right.
Yeah.
Whether just trying to find those, even 5-10 minutes of just turning it all out and just learning to just listen to your voice or your breathing even, right? Like just to shut it all out for 5 minutes might be.
Yeah. It's a scary thought though. Because I will say I will share just a quick personal story. When I was at BCIT, I was in the broadcast program. And the one thing I never expected to be forced to do is to do a yoga class in a program about radio. And I was asking, why the hell are we doing yoga? And it was interesting. Like, I hated it at first, but one of the things that I found really difficult to deal with is the whole meditation aspect of being aware of your own breath, and just sitting in silence was actually really disturbing. And it took, it was a period of an adjustment over a number of weeks of getting used to it. And I think most of us are not really used to just silence, like quieting our own minds. And it's kind of a weird thing now, because we're constantly bombarded with information on our cell phones. We have 24/7 unlimited access to this information if we really want. And there are clearly very much downsides to this. I mean, just look at on YouTube. I mean, half the time, if you ever read comments on YouTube, like, people just have no attention span for anything now. You know, people complain about, oh, you spent too long doing the introduction on your video. Well, just fast forward it if you don't like it. But people have no attention span now for anything.
Yeah.
Well, and that's how they're curating these videos now, is they're taking into account
Clips.
the lack of attention
Right.
span.
Well, that's why people have to release
making
clips.
them shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
You know?
30-second little or 60-second bites.
Yeah, and how many of those kids have read a fucking book in the past?
Well, that's
year?
another problem. People aren't
Right?
reading anymore.
Well, actually, apparently the bookstores are seeing a real renaissance due to the pandemic here. Apparently, a lot of people are starting to get, going out to the used bookstores and hitting up the vintage places. And yeah, apparently books are a thing now. So, hey, who knew?
Mommy, great. What's this thing made out of paper with weird words on the page?
How do I scroll to the next page?
Blasphemy!
I'm a firm believer that books make you smarter.
Well, most books.
Unless it's a book about...
there's some shitty books out there.
Unless it's a book about...
teaches you something, right?
Unless it's a book about the earth being flat, then maybe not so much.
Teaches you something, right? Like, that's the thing. Like there's always something to be learned from that alternative view.
Yeah.
And that's my problem, is that a lot of people just want to dismiss it and go, there's nothing to learn from this. But I just go, like, there really is. There's something to learn from the people who really believe in a flat earth. Right? Like, there's something to be learned from what that means for us as humanity, and how we all fall, victim to these really just illogical ideas sometimes. And what does that mean for how we move forward as a race, or as the overarching race is the one. I don't know. Anyway, not a race, species. That's what I was looking for.
Right. Well, I mean, just look at how we interact with each other as families. If how many kids sit down and eat? How many people even eat dinner together as a family on a regular basis? Like, I'm not talking about in front of the TV. I'm talking about really sitting down at a table, looking at each other. Well, maybe not now because of the pandemic, but you know what I mean. Before that, before things turned to absolute shit, just being able to sit down and have a conversation and just being present in the moment and focusing on the conversation, it just seems like we've kind of lost that.
It's quite rare. I mean, how many houses do you go into and the TV's just always on?
Right.
Yeah.
Which is one of my biggest pet peeves.
Oh, God,
right?
yeah.
You go in to have a visit, see a friend, and the TV's in the background. And no matter how hard you try, you can't help but look at it.
Yes.
Right? So you're constantly doing this. Your attention is split.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem.
But it's everywhere. Restaurants, like, everything has just constant.
It's a constant barrage. Input. Yeah, with TV, I mean, for me, TV is never a background thing for me. I mean, I may get up in the middle and go wash the dishes or whatever, but it's not something that I just leave on all day. It's a very intentional thing. I'm seeking out this piece of content. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch this thing, and then when it's done, I'm shutting it off. Right? I don't think that it's definitely not a good thing, and I don't think it's a good thing for kids to just friggin' watch TV all day.
There's plenty of people that can't even sleep without having the TV on.
Mm-hmm. That
because they've gotten so
addicted
to that level
of
input all the time that they cannot physically sleep without it.
See, and I
That's
put
crazy.
something on in the background where I'll just, I'll have a series or something going, and I won't necessarily pay attention to the whole thing, but I'll kind of be doing something else, and maybe that's, something to do. Like I'm sitting here with 1, 2, 3 different screens in front of me. My phone's right there, right? Like I'm kind of that person where I've always got 4 or 5 screens going at any one time, anyway, right? But whether that's. But I've also had the time, like I used to sell computers, and when I got out of computers, I completely went Luddite, right? I had 2 years of, I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a computer, I didn't have screens, I didn't have any of it, right? Where I just completely tried to find my inner self, right, for a little while. And I think that's kind of a journey that a lot of people are maybe missing right now, that kind of spiritual, find who you are outside of all this stuff. Right.
Okay, well, hold on. Tell me more about that. So you did that for a little while. What kind of effect did that have on you? What did you observe?
It was basically just more kind of an experiment just to see if it was possible for me to do it. And it is, right? Which I think is kind of my issue with a lot of this, where people go, oh, I can't put it down. And I go, yeah, you can. You can. You absolutely can. I used to smoke. I smoked for 25 years and I quit. Right. And it was really hard, but it's doable. And so, I used to be 300 pounds, right? And I got out of that stuff. So I just keep going, like, all of these problems that people go, oh, I can't do it. I go, yeah, you can. Just do it.
You just have to want to do it.
And that's the problem.
Pushing through the uncomfortableness, right?
And
like kind of like what you were saying, Alex, about the yoga and just sitting with yourself, right? It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think it's good to feel, and you feel it's okay to feel pain. You will feel pain, and that's okay.
Exactly the issue. Yeah. Yeah. I go back to the Shaolin monks who sit and they will take a bowl of sand and they'll go thunk, 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 thunk for an hour, thunk, thunk, and it'll wear all the meat off of their fingers. But what it does is it creates microfractures in the bone that fill with calcium and make that bone stronger. Right? They'll sit and they'll take their arm and they'll smack it against the bore of a tree or a piece of wood or something, which again induces microfractures and makes that bone stronger. So they do it in a way that actually is making them tougher. So they deal with the pain, right, in a way that actually helps them move forward. And they've actually done brain scans on these people, and they found that their pain reflex is much, much smaller than you would have for most general people who haven't spent that time, training themselves to endure a little bit of pain.
Interesting.
Right? But it actually, really is it's scientifically proven to make them physically and their bones are filling with more calcium, which makes them stronger.
Now, do they do this? Is this specifically as a strength building exercise? Is that what it is? Building resilience?
Yeah. It's so that, when they get into a fight and they have to kick something, right, that their bone doesn't break because they've trained their bones to be stronger and more resilient.
Interesting.
Right? Like it's really weird when you think about it, but it's actually they've done studies and they've shown that these people actually have stronger bones than normal people. And that might be a way of dealing with osteoporosis moving forward, where if we can induce these kind of microfractures and build these bones to be stronger from, an earlier age, that might prove to be, make them more resilient to these loss of calcium things and issues that we have as senior citizens moving forward. Right, where they might be more resilient. They've shown that if you do muscle training as a child, it actually, muscle cells are multicellular. Okay, so when you're stressing those muscle cells, you're actually creating more nuclei inside those cells. Okay, so even if you stop training, if that muscle atrophies a little bit, those cells are still there and available to grow again if you start to work that muscle. Okay, so what it essentially means is that if you grow muscle as a child, as you grow into adulthood and get further on, you're better able to regrow that muscle mass and stave off the effects of deterioration and a lot of the effects that we're having is, from sitting all day.
Right.
We have these issues with back problems and all sorts of muscle issues going forward. But if those muscles had been built stronger beforehand, they'd be better able to deal with these stresses that we're putting on them now and hopefully be better able to stretch themselves out and become, more resilient as we go. So
that makes sense.
That's where this little bit of pain, and even meditation, people get that mental issue with just shutting off their mind for a little while. Whoa, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I got to deal with my own thoughts. Oh, that's horrible. Right. But it's just a
there's
matter
some
of
weird shit in there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I think it's a matter of, you just kick that board just that little bit. Whap. Oh, okay. Well, it didn't kill me. Let's try it again. Whap. Oh, okay. Right? Like,
Yeah,
it's
that's
still,
the thing.
I got a
It's-
bit of a bruise, right? And I think it builds that resiliency of knowing that it's not going to kill you, right? Like all these fears and all these, things that hold us back. It's not going to kill you. Probably won't. Right?
Yeah,
Public
it's-
speaking. Everybody has a real fear of public speaking. Is it going to kill you? Probably not.
I see this a lot with I have a lot of respect for my sister and how she raises her two boys, because she very much pays close attention to how much time they're spending playing video games or watching cartoons, and she really restricts how much time they spend. I used to watch way more TV than them and play way more video games for hours and hours and hours at a time without a lot of supervision. And my sister's much more careful about that kind of thing. But it's funny, even with those restrictions, you can see the attitude shift immediately when she goes, okay, we're putting that device down now. And sometimes they'll have a temper tantrum and like, no, 5 more minutes. But you can see how this, like, technology is a wonderful thing, but you can see the effects that it has on people, right? Especially at a young age when your mind is so elastic and it's so susceptible to influence, and you're not a good judge of determining boundaries of like, is it okay for me to do this for 6 hours? Is that going to have any kind of negative impact? You're not good at making those kind of judgment calls when you're young, right? So,
well, and I think the difference is that, back in the caveman days, the fire was very entrancing, and it was really, you could get really caught up in staring into the flames. You could have a real, but that wasn't engineered to addict you.
yes.
Right. And I think that's the difference of where we are now, is that back in the day, they didn't have boredom because they had stuff to do. Now we have something that's literally been engineered and designed to take your attention and grab it and get your attention for as long as it possibly can. And if it loses your attention for 1 second, it counts that as a loss and a failure of the algorithm.
Yeah.
Right?
You see that everything from advertising to the way video games are engineered, the quote unquote gamification of everything, of just the microtransactions. Like, oh well, you want to do this next thing? Cough up $2, cough up $5, cough up, and you just keep.
You can do it,
and then they give you the reward. It's like the hamster in the laboratory just waiting for that food pellet, right? They just
your buddies have that weapon. Don't you want that gun? Yeah,
exactly. Well, you just become conditioned to stimuli, right?
Yeah.
And so you're expecting the reward at the end.
And if people aren't aware that is part of your brain structure that they are tweaking and doing it deliberately, and it's not on, you have no choice on this. If you're not aware of it, they'll happily just do it behind your back without even telling you about it. And I think that's a lot of the problem now, is that, we'd like to think that they're doing this for, our own good, right? It's to make you better, right? Right. But it's not, it's for profit. And that's where I have a real issue with a lot of this stuff, is this gamification thing, is just so that they can make more money. And who are they taking that from? Well, me, right?
And I think we've really complicated the issue as well by having it be so acceptable, right? Yeah. So it's normal to see people with their face buried in their phone. It's normal. You actually look like the odd one out if you're sitting there not looking at your phone, right?
Well, let alone,
and
if
I
you
actually
have to
make
say
a
to someone,
point of
"Don't look at your phone."
I actually make a point of leaving my phone at home. And I love to take myself out for, little date nights for just me, right? So I'll leave my phone at home. I go to a restaurant by myself, take myself on a date, right? And people actually give me the strangest looks because I'm just sitting there and observing, right? I'm not buried in my phone. Maybe sometimes I'll have a book, but it's, that person's a freak, right? Like, what's wrong with her?
I was just thinking, like, that must be awesome, right? Just to watch people's, and I'm a people watcher. I love that kind of shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, just sitting in that, and because you don't have that screen in front of you, just paying attention to what people are paying attention to, and seeing them watch you. Like that.
But I found it makes them very uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is interesting, right?
Isn't
Here's
it,
a person just existing in the world, right? And that really does trigger people a lot.
Doesn't anybody love her?
I did actually. I went to this one Japanese restaurant, and the owner came out and did ask. She was like, "Are you okay?" She was genuinely concerned for my well-being.
What?
Is your phone broken? Has it been destroyed?
Yeah,
Are you,
yeah. And I was like, I'm great. And I was like, this is
you
my
need to borrow
happy
my
place,
phone?
right?
Here, you can borrow my phone.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just content, right? And I'll sit there. Sometimes I'll be there for hours just on my own, having a great time. But
that actually sounds really nice.
Yeah.
It's lovely. I recommend it to everyone. Take yourself on a proper date, get dressed up, order some wine, have a 3-course meal, and just sit there.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing.
Well, did you? I think you left out the part where you actually started having a conversation with yourself. I think that's the issue that they had.
That's
when
really
you're ordering drinks for the person, the invisible person across from you. That's when you get the word looks. Yeah. Oh, don't worry, I'll drink it too. But
Oh, you got a gift for me. Oh, that's so thoughtful.
You're the best.
Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
Yeah, hey. And I think that's kind of something to think about moving forward is taking even just that hour away, that 2 hours away from your phone, right? Like just learning to have that moment of silence.
Yeah.
That was another kind of experiment I ran when I was a young adult. Was just I took a while where I just tried to shut the fuck up. Right, where I just for a year or so just tried to just if people were talking to me, I would speak to them, and otherwise I would just shut the fuck up.
It's wise advice.
Which is the same kind of thing you were talking about. How it's very interesting to see people go about their business when you're not filling your mind with what to say next. Right, like how you can really observe things and how people interact with each other and kind of what's going on around you in a lot of different ways that aren't accessible when you're constantly trying to fill your, face with some shit. Right. Yeah. It was quite an interesting little bit to just, try to shut up for a little while. And then maybe that's something that we need.
I mean, how can you allow new things in if you're already full? Yeah. Right? Like, let's picture your mind. It's like a water bottle, right? And it's filled to the brim and you've got the cap on tight constantly, right? How are you ever going to get something new in there? Right? Something you got to empty it out to be able to allow new things to come in.
And come to think of it, it was after my time in China where I had really kind of studied some meditation and really just kind of had tried to learn to shut my brain down that little bit, where I just decided that the words were part of the problem. Now that I kind of go back to that time, it was kind of immediately after that. And maybe that was part of where that kind of spiritual journey came from, of just, like, who am I and what do I really want to say? Because I just felt like what I was speaking before wasn't moving, wasn't, what am I really trying to do here? And it's not until you actually just shut the fuck up for a little while and just think about that, Yeah.
I don't know if either of you have a coworker that does this, but it drives me insane. I've got one person that I work with who's not only like, he's always looking at these stupid memes on his phone, and he'll just walk around, and he'll just shove his phone like in your face like this. He goes, "Oh, look at this, like that, like," and I'll be actually in the middle of something. I'll be like writing an email, and I'm like, dude, don't just shove the fucking phone in my face. Can't you see I'm doing something right now? It's like, oh, it's so funny. I'm like, every 2 seconds, look at this meme. I'm like, dude, it's not that funny. And second of all, I'm in the middle of something. Like, it's just constant. It's a constant thing. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, I don't understand it. Some people are just so, they're just constantly wanting to fill every waking moment with whatever is going on the internet. Look at this trend. Look at this thing. Did you hear about this? I'm like, you know what? No, I didn't, and I'll probably find out eventually. But it's like the constant, like, I don't need you to report every piece of news that you just heard. I really don't.
Well,
well, and I don't mind if you want to have a proper conversation about it, but I find that that's becoming more and more infrequent. It's just, here's a little regurgitation of a blip that was posted online, and I have nothing more to say about it, right? But it's just like, I don't know, floating this as intelligence really gets to me. Because I'm like, okay, yeah, let's talk. Let's discuss. What do you think about it? And then you just kind of met with like blank face, right?
Yeah. Well, it's especially problematic when they're like, did you hear about this and so did this? And then I rebut with, actually, did you even read that article? Because it sounds like you didn't read it entirely, because what you're actually saying is not even the entire story. Or you're just regurgitating it incorrectly. Just
repeating the headline.
You know? So that's a big problem too. People that just read a headline and read maybe the first paragraph and the last, right? Or they just cherry pick things, and then it gets, when they regurgitate it, it gets twisted and contorted, and suddenly the information isn't even accurate anymore.
Yeah, well, they've shown that, you know, the longer stories tend to get shorter attention spans, right? So they, you know, people will click on something and they'll read it for 5 seconds and then move on, instead of following that thought through to the end, right? And like you said, so they're just reading the headlines of it and considering that to be the whole of the story. But the problem is the headline has been designed to grab your attention.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily telling you the whole story behind it. It's telling you the interesting parts that you're supposed to go, oh, cool, I got to read this article.
Yeah.
Right. And again, if you're not aware that that's what's happening, you're just going to read that surface level stuff and not actually understand any of it. Right.
Yeah.
I go back to Einstein. If you can't explain it to an 8-year-old, then you're not really grasping it. Right.
Yeah.
So
I think we should all make some kind of effort to acknowledge the effects of social media, of technology, of our attention constantly, like people vying for our attention constantly. And that's not a good thing. That you should try to carve some time out in your day to do something else. Like, one of the things I actually found it was very depressing to me that I'd gone several years without reading one book. And so about a year ago, I decided to fix that, and I just went to the library and got my membership, and because it'd been a while, and I just started taking books out. And last year, I think I read something like 8 books, which for me is a lot. I've got friends that I know people that are avid readers that read 25, 30 books a year. Yeah. That seems insane to me. The fact that I read even 8 makes me really happy, because I wasn't reading anything.
And that's actually usually how when I meet someone, that's one of the first questions I ask is, what was the last book you read? And it's not necessarily about like what you've read, but more the fact of whether you've been reading. Right? Like that's kind of more what I'm trying to get at here with this question, right? Like, have you actually read a book since you left high school?
Well, let's see now. The last book I read was Grover Goes to the Hospital.
Yeah, right. Like, I've talked to people that literally haven't read a book since high school. Magazines, the occasional article here and there.
That's probably pretty common.
And that's probably more common than you'd like to hope.
It's like, dear God, no wonder the world is just falling apart.
Well, it's the problem of the people that are proud of that.
Right. Oh, like I haven't read a book and I'm fine.
And that's the issue right there is the number of people that are actually like, I haven't read a book in 20 years. Thank goodness. Right. I've only read the Bible. Like, oh, dude, like, right.
And some people get defensive, and it's totally I think a coping mechanism, because I've seen people get defensive and call other people like, oh, Mr. Smarty Pants, oh, big reader, huh? Think you're so smart because you read books. Yeah.
See, I work in construction, and unfortunately, that mentality is somewhat common.
No. I'm sure.
Right? Where like,
really?
I would work on these large crews, and I couldn't sit in the lunchroom because the whole conversation for the entire half an hour of us sitting there would be booby, booby, dick, dick, booby, 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 dick, booby, 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 dick, dick, booby, booby, you know, and I'd go,
wow.
You know, they just did a study about gravitational waves and they've discovered that, and then you go, oh, booby, booby. You know, and that's my thing. And the problem is that you can't really get after these guys for not being there.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just go like, isn't there something more than what we're, you know? And it was the same thing where you'd see the one guy off in the corner reading a book, and occasionally somebody would nudge him and be like, don't you want to be a part of this? Right? Yeah. And he's like, no, I'm good, thanks. Right?
Tempting as that sounds.
Yeah, you know. Yeah. And I just I get that's sorry,
Kristen.
I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with people that don't read as long as they're filling their time with something a bit more meaningful.
Productive, right?
Right. Yeah. So if you're like, oh, I don't really read, but I am an avid painter, or I'm a musician, or whatever it is, it's like, cool. Yeah, we've got time for that. You're more likely to have a conversation, I think.
Kristen, what if I met you for the first time and I said I only read comic books? What would be the first thought?
I would be like, cool, let's talk about it. Which comic books do you read? Why do you like them? Right? Yeah. What do you get?
Because I thought comic books don't count.
The operative word there was read.
Right. Okay. So read. So we shouldn't make fun of somebody for reading a particular type of thing, but as long as you're reading,
definitely not. No. Yeah.
And that's the thing.
People
right?
like different genres, right? Some people like fiction. Some people like smutty romance. Some people like non-fiction.
I pretty much exclusively read hard sci-fi. That's my thing. I'm into that. I read the occasional what was the last biography? I'm just trying to think. Oh, the last thing I read was Corey Feldman's memoir, which was really interesting. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't read a lot of memoirs, that type of stuff, or nonfiction. It's usually hard sci-fi.
Yeah, I'm looking for something to take me out of here.
Yeah, exactly. I want my brain to go. I want my brain to go somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, I pretty much read anything and everything.
Yeah,
I mean, on average, I usually have 3 books at a time on the go. Just switch it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is anybody reading anything good right now? I'm just starting Alex Trebek's book about his life.
Ooh.
I've been taking a bit of a break. I've been reading these books by an author named Steven Erikson, who writes these 1,300 page epics. Yeah. And there's 10 of them in each series. Yeah. And it's just,
he's one of those guys.
Right? So it's just okay, right? Never mind. You just got to take a step back and just okay, all right.
Yeah, that's a commitment. If you do, you really got to be committed. Okay, I'm gonna be starting this series now, so I have to really focus on finishing it.
Yeah. So I mean, after reading the many books, I've taken just a bit of a break lately, and I've been reading articles on the phone, which is not necessarily helping, but.
Well, it doesn't matter what device you're using.
Again, it's more Although I find reading a book is nice because it just gets you out of that space, right? It lets you.
I still prefer reading physical books, or I find I can read long form stuff on my iPad, but the one thing that it's a must for me is I will shut off. I'll put my device into a state where absolutely zero notifications. Nothing is fucking whistling and beeping and making noises, because otherwise it just pulls you out of what you're reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even just things silently flash, even things without sound, but stuff just stuff flashing on the screen like that is such a distraction.
Yep.
And there are lots of people that have written books, and I've done studies about what this actually affects, how this even affects productivity, even in the business workplace. It's very interesting to see how just terrible we're not really engineered for multitasking efficiently. No, yes, of course. Okay, some people can multitask, maybe do 2 things. Some people are better at it, but for the most part, we're not really engineered to do multiple tasks really evenly and equally good.
Well, that's the problem is that those people who are they may have if it's something that they've done over and over and over again, they're able to switch between those tasks, right?
Right.
But the problem is that our brains are only doing one thing at a time consciously. And every time we're switching those tasks, it takes a certain amount of brain energy.
Sure.
Right? And that's the part that we're not aware of in this day and age, is that tax on our brain adds up. And so every screen you add, every notification, every blip, every time you've tried to concentrate on something in a screen, flash from over here, draws your attention away. You now have to use energy to focus on that task and then move back to the task that you were doing. And even if you're not aware that that's happening inside your brain, that is using up energy that you're not aware of, right?
Yeah, there's a cost. So, there's a cost to doing that, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think pilots are, one hand flying the plane, the other hand they're checking Twitter. I don't think that's really happening.
God, I hope not.
Oh, most of it's autopilot. They're barely doing anything. They're flipping switches and letting.
Well, there is a lot of automation now, but that would be a scary. That would be a scary
I'm
thought.
Overgeneralizing, of course.
Yes, I get. But yeah, you're right. Especially for certain tasks that require. If you got to do something that's going to expend a lot of mental energy and where you really need to focus, especially if something like making any kind of mistake could be catastrophic, you absolutely should not be doing anything else. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we say the wrong thing in this podcast and the whole world falls apart. I mean, it's a real responsibility.
Yeah, you didn't know that I actually, I oftentimes do this podcast while I'm managing a nuclear reactor, so.
We don't all have mini nuclear reactors.
I've got one button on the trigger, and I'm monitoring things right now, so it's all good. I'm pretty good at
that. Well, that's your first problem. You have a button on the trigger.
Yeah.
It's just extra steps. You can just have a trigger or a button. You don't need the button on the. It's okay.
Yeah, I really should hire some kind of assistant, some kind of intern.
Yeah, you need two people, one for the button, one for the trigger.
So how do different societies handle boredom? Do we know that? Like outside of North America, different cultures. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because there's certain cultures in certain villages, small remote places where they don't readily have access to technology. I'm sure there's plenty of places that don't even have access to the internet that live a more simple lifestyle. And those people seem to be doing okay.
We're doing the right way of living, right? Like this is the thing, is that your way of living your life is cool, right?
It's right for you.
Exactly, right? And whether you decide to do it with technology or whether you have no access to that technology, I mean, to say that life is any less fulfilling than what we're living right now, I would argue is right.
Right.
Not necessarily true, right? I think that you can absolutely. Sorry?
The concept of boredom itself, though, I think arguably wouldn't exist in those sorts of cultures, right? More like tribal kind of hunter-gatherer.
Yes.
It wouldn't, because you would just
always
do things when you needed to do something. And if you didn't, then you would just sit there.
And there's a better sense of community too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we've lost that. We've lost that in many ways.
Well, I think that's the thing, is that we filled that boredom with these screens instead of filling it with, actual relationships and actual communication and any actual, meaningful, look at life.
So our devices have become the community. The internet has become our overall, our bigger family, our bigger community. Mm-hmm. In a way.
Yeah, it's definitely filled that need, I think, for a lot of people. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the healthiest way. So instead of, putting yourself out there and the risk of rejection that would happen in real life interactions, it's probably a lot easier to then become attached to an internet family, a virtual one, where you could just leave it at any time with absolutely no consequence to your life.
As soon as they say something you don't agree with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then without the attachments, there'd be nothing to hold you to it. And I think that's the thing, is that, this community that we live in has this idea that we're all looking out for each other. Mm-hmm. And that's part of where I think we're losing sight of what's important here is the us part of this, where we're looking out for each other, right? And if we start to, build these walls around ourselves where we can't communicate with each other, it becomes a lot harder for us to be able to
Yeah.
deal with things when these pandemics come along, right? Like we're going to have to band together. And I think that's, I think moving forward, what we're going to see a lot more of is real relationship building. I think this next couple of years is going to really be something where we're going to see a real exponential growth in our ability to communicate with each other. So I'm glad that we've started this podcast right at the start of this, right? Because I think that that's what's really brought into sharp relief this pandemic, this lockdown that we've all had to go through, where you don't get to communicate with anyone. So what do? Right. So I think now when we get the chance to interact with someone, it's going to be a real opportunity to just put that shit away and just look someone in the eyes and go, hey.
I hope so. Right? I mean, it's going to force you one way or the other, right? You're either going to be missing that human, genuine connection so much that, we'll be desperate for it. Or it can drive people further into this kind of void filling, so to speak, right?
Yeah. And I mean, this is where technology has actually been very much a good thing, because without the current technology that we have, we wouldn't be able to, in this kind of environment that we're living in now, with not being able to leave our homes as much as we want to and not being able to see the people that we want to, is that without that technology, we would be truly isolated.
Mm-hmm. And that's, going back to your coworker with the showing of his memes, he may just be an extrovert stuck in a position where he doesn't have the kind of, connection that he requires to fulfill. And so he sees you as the cool guy in town and wants to, and that's just him reflexively trying to, have a conversation that he can't have. Right.
Yeah, that's a very enlightened way of looking at it, I think, that I didn't really think about. Maybe I'll keep that in mind next time, because sometimes I let it get to me sometimes, and I get annoyed with him.
Yeah, instead of looking at the gift that he's actually trying to give you of his time.
Right.
And I think I have a lot of that issue too, where, it's just, I have this time and why are you getting in my way of it? Right? I have this thing that I was trying to do, instead of going, wait a minute, there's a reason that you came to talk to me, and you're sacrificing your time just as much as I am for you. Right. So
I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind it as much too, but I mean, you got to also be respectful. Just be more aware of your environment. If you see someone typing an email, at the very least, you can say, hey, do you have a second? Do you have a moment? Or just wait for them to finish what they're doing.
And maybe that's the conversation to have with him.
That would, that absolutely. I haven't had that conversation.
I'm not sure if you're aware that maybe this is some sort of social cue that you're just not aware of.
I'm just sitting here and stewing in my own anger and not actually communicating with him and telling him, like, hey, this is not cool when you just, this is a constant thing with you.
Yep, that's what we're here for, ladies and gentlemen. Solving issues.
Yeah. I mean, this is like a giant therapy session for me.
That's all this is. That's literally what this whole podcast was designed to be, was just a little bit of trying to find the other perspective, just trying to see it from that other side, and just try to find out why we are doing these things. Yeah. Right. Like, why is it that you have this compulsion to just blurt stuff out to me, despite the fact that I'm obviously working on something. Right. Yeah. Is there a reason why you're doing this? And is it something that we can deal with outside of this and just have this conversation of why are you doing this, that we need to do something else, right? Like there's constructive ways of dealing with this stuff that I think we just start to lose sight of by just getting irritated, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a problem with the cognitive load that we're under right now, where we're all just right here all the time. And so just that little bit of, hey, buddy, right, is just too much right now, right? And we all just need to start just bringing it down to eye level, and we're all supposed to just deal with each other here.
Yeah.
Kristen?
I think we're looking for like people to blame as well, right? Like everyone just projects all of their everything outwards, right? Yeah. Like even being frustrated or angry with someone else, right? That's just a projection of however kind of you're feeling. For other probably completely unrelated reasons, right?
Yeah.
And I was reading something really interesting the other day, and one particular part jumped out at me, and it said, being angry or frustrated or any of these negative kind of emotions, it's the same thing as if you were to drink poison and then expect the other person to die.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I thought that's actually pretty spot on, because
you're
just
about the revenge addiction.
Well, yeah. But you are just poisoning yourself, right? By allowing yourself to become angry and frustrated by what other people are doing.
Yeah, and it doesn't help, like me going and kind of complaining to other people. I did everything but go to directly to the person that was bothering me and actually express why I was, so that's kind of counterintuitive.
But that's where I think a lot of it is, we all do this inside our own heads.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to just take that outside of your head and present it to someone else and say, okay, so I got this thing, right? And just say, like, does this make sense, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need that someone else looking at it to go, oh, dude, that's just a thing, right? Like, it's all cool. Just put that back in. You're fine, right? Right? And you just need to look at it from this view, right? And I think that's where, the community of us makes that easier. Right? Because we all have these weird things inside our heads that we go, okay, wait, that's not just me, right? Right? But, if we're not able to express those uncomfortable things every once in a while, it becomes a real issue because we're just holding that shit in, and then it's tough to, let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm so
thankful.
Circle back to sitting with those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that I have you guys to talk about stuff like this too, because you bring up things that I perhaps did not consider about whatever it is, whatever subject that we're talking about. In this case, maybe a problem that I had. So that's it definitely does make me think I have to handle this differently and just communicate a little bit better.
It's altogether possible he really is just an asshole. I mean,
I don't think he is. He's a good guy, but I think he's definitely unaware of sometimes of people's surroundings too. Because there are other times too where this is another thing, and I know other people have complained about it, where I might be, let's say, Aaron, the two of us are having a conversation, and he just walks right up to us, shoves his phone right in between our faces, and goes, "Look at this." It's like, that's pretty rude.
But that might be what he's done in the past, and that has worked for him.
Maybe.
And that's kind of, again, this part of that conversation, right? Like, that might be part of the culture that he's grown up in.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right? Maybe that's what his brother's done to him or his dad or whatever has done that to him in his entire life, and he just hasn't realized that was something that most people don't appreciate.
Yeah. Definitely don't appreciate it.
Maybe he's just an asshole. Yeah. I gotta keep circling back to that one. But
that is always a very real possibility. Sometimes people are just assholes.
That's the thing. That's the thing about playing devil's advocate, is that it does flip back and forth every once in a while, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's, again, just a matter of understanding that we all have come from a different place.
Absolutely. The other thing I was going to bring up was, I don't think getting rid of social media altogether, getting rid of all these things, fixes anything. I think because inevitably what happens is you replace one problem with another problem. And if it's not Facebook, it's whatever the next biggest thing is. And I think it's ultimately the onus also has to be on us to recognize, like, I need to carve out time out of my day to do other things. That I shouldn't just be on my face shouldn't be buried in my phone at all times. When I'm having a conversation with someone, I should put it away. I should be present in the moment with that person and listen to what they have to say, so that I can respond properly. So I think we just all need to be aware of that too. Like, it's really hard. Like, for me, it would be very difficult to just cold turkey quit social media, just because I manage a ton of different accounts for business related purposes. I can't just get rid of all that stuff. Right? So
that was another little experiment that I've been running for the past few months here, where I just shut that shit out entirely, and it's been kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're also not managing Facebook pages for big companies either.
Well, and that's where, I recognize that now, because I am, we're doing this podcast, which is internet thing. So
yes, I think
in order to do this, I really should have some sort of presence on there. I recognize that.
Right.
Right. But, I also come back to, as an artist, I just go, the business end of this thing is not my forte. I'm here to make art. I'm here to express these ideas and have this, conversation and really get into the thoughts of these things. And that doesn't necessarily include how do I make money off of this? Right. And that's always been kind of my existential dilemma with a lot of the art that I've tried to make over my lifetime is I have no real desire to monetize it. But in order to get anywhere in this world, guess what?
Yeah.
Right?
It's a tough balance because ultimately with any creative endeavor, I think you got to go into it with the right reasons. And if you go into it with the sole intention of money, the product that you inevitably end up producing suffers because you weren't really making an earnest effort. It was just, you're probably going to cut corners. You're probably going to make certain decisions that you think at the time may be right, but make the creative things suffer, right?
That's why I can't listen to most of the radio music nowadays. I just can't. Sorry, guys.
I mean, there's less and less people listening to radio all the time. That's another problem altogether.
But that's because of that exact where it's designed to be radio friendly. Right. And that's all it's not meant to say anything. It's not meant to speak to a greater truth. It's not meant to. Right. It's just meant to. Hey, everybody, I got a simple solution for you.
And that sing-songy voice.
Exactly. And literally in those 3 notes the whole time.
Right.
And I just. And that's OK every once in a while to break stuff down to simple. Right. But sure. I listen to, complex metal basically and I like something that speaks to you. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I like to listen to all forms of music. I'm open to all types of expression, but as soon as I start to see the money becoming the main issue or the main part of why you're doing it, I tune out immediately.
Yeah.
And that's maybe just me, right? But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I'm trying to move myself forward by listening to music, right? Like it's an expression of who I am and where I am right now, right? So I've played in country bands, I've played in metal bands, I've played in rock and roll bands, right? I've done all sorts of different kinds of stuff, right? But all of that was just to try to figure out, what I want to say. And this is it, right? Is that we have a choice of making us better and it's time to choose it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, look, not everyone that's a musician that would be interested in exposing themselves to all sorts of different musical styles, and it's fine if you only want to do that one thing, but I think that it's good. I think the fact that you did that speaks to some of the things that you said at the beginning of this episode about not only surrounding yourself with people that agree or believe in the same things that you do, like that you should actually purposefully seek out opposing beliefs, opposing opinions, right? If you only listen to hard rock, maybe you should try listening to some blues, listen to some pop music, because even if you want to keep doing whatever it is you're doing, there's always something to learn from other cultures, right? There's always something to learn from other musical genres. You can apply that to so many things in life. Like it's so limiting to just have that one track mind to just, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be influenced by any of this other stuff because I want to be, and it's like this elitist attitude that I just don't think really, I don't think you evolve as a person if you have that kind of mindset.
Read a book in 20 years.
Yeah. Exactly. It's that dude that's proud of not reading anything.
Yeah.
So what?
And see, that's where, as an actor, like that's my other thing is that like my job as an actor is to assimilate emotions, right? So a lot of where I've been has been trying to look at other people and why they do and what they do and try to understand it. And I think that's something that a lot of us could benefit from, right? Is just learning to take yourself out of yourself for a little while and try to become someone else. It is. It's really tough. And that's why there's courses, classes, and, actors spend years and years and years trying to learn to get out of themselves. Yeah. Right. So that the person that they are on screen is a completely different them than the person they are. Right. And again, I think that's an exercise that a lot of people would really benefit from. I was reading an article about how even just changing your internal thoughts to, instead of relating to yourself in the first person, you relate to yourself in the third person. They, I am they. Right. And how even just having that level of disconnect in your head makes it much easier to empathize, much easier to see things from other people's perspectives, to be able to, really consider that maybe there's more than me out there, right? Even just that simple little shift inside the head can make big differences for how we deal with each other moving forward.
Yeah. I use the fly on the wall analogy a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like pull myself out of it to be a fly, and then you look back on the situation having taken you out of it.
Yeah,
and we were talking about boredom, and I think that I think this ties into a lot of that, right? Is that I never get bored because I can always just put myself into someone else's shoes for a little while and try to experience my life through them.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a thing, exercise for moving forward, right? Is learning to just put ourselves in someone else's walk for a little while.
Yeah. And here's a question for everybody listening and watching now. What are you going to do to fill your boredom?
Outside of your phone.
Right. What? Because I think we should all try to
do differently. How about that one?
Like, we should all try to break our own bad habits too, right? If you haven't read a book in 20 years, don't beat yourself up, but maybe just make a change.
That's exactly
right. Just do something different.
And that's the point, is that there's never a time where you can't make those changes. That's kind of the thing we're going to deal with a lot with this podcast, is you can move forward. You can teach an old dog new tricks.
Absolutely.
Right.
People have such a defeated.
Are so set in our ways that we can't make those changes if we actually wanted to. So
some people have such a defeatist attitude. I see that with people, with friends and family all the time, especially family members that are older that think that they can't change, they can't do this thing, they can't learn this thing. Oh, it's too late for me. I don't understand that. That concept is just so foreign to me.
Well, it's like a victimization complex, right?
Yeah.
And I guess it's safer. It's kind of like a defense mechanism, because if you constantly play the victim, well, then you don't have to justify why you're not putting yourself out there, right?
There you go.
So you don't need to get hurt, you don't need to fail, and you get sympathy from others. So it's kind of like a win-win for your ego.
Yeah. And that was my problem, was that, all of those things, like me being fat, me being a smoker, all of those things that held me from making those changes were all just fucking excuses. And that's my problem. Like the obesity thing, it's just an excuse. There's no fucking reason why anyone in this world would need to be obese.
I agree.
There just isn't.
I agree.
There just isn't. Right? And it's very small and very incremental changes that you can make. All I did was take half the food that I was eating and put it away. I would take my plate, I would eat half of it, I would put the rest of it away for a couple hours. I'd eat it later. But the simple fact of the matter is that if you change the amount of stuff you're putting into you, it's a very small little change that you can make that actually can make a big difference, right? And your body processes food better in little tiny pieces about the size of your fist, apparently, versus these gigantic, supersized meals that we shovel into our bodies and expect that company that sold us that is looking out for our best interests. Yeah. They're not.
Yeah, and if you don't do any exercise, maybe try taking a walk and start small, right?
That's
and
the thing. It's
don't take your
steps.
phone with you. That's the thing too, right? On the boredom subject, like be it's okay. Like, go for a walk and just smell the fresh air. And it's okay to be, if you find that boring, that just kind of sit with that. Just.
Yeah.
Why is
I like
that
to
boring?
commit to like just 10 minutes a day, right? That's not a daunting number.
No.
Even 5 minutes a day, if that even scares you, right? That is
Yeah.
nothing. If you think of the amount of time that you waste scrolling on your phone
Sure.
or watching TV or literally just doing nothing at all, 5 minutes, right? So whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, whether that's to pick up a book, whether that's to do a bit of exercise or to cook something healthy for yourself. And after 5 minutes, if you're over it, you say, okay, great. But you did it, and then you can feel good about yourself for it. But almost every person that's tried it ends up going longer than that 5 minutes, that 10 minutes, because you're doing something that's good and beneficial for you. So naturally, you're going to want to continue it. But it's just the overwhelming, right? Like, we're such a instant gratification culture that we expect change to happen immediately.
Yeah.
So if it's not right away, let's say it's weight loss, if you haven't dropped 50 pounds in a week, you're going to give up because you haven't seen any change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's,
You just
let's
have
get
to
rid
keep,
of that
you have
idea.
to keep at it too. Like, it's so hard. Like, it's,
Yeah.
maybe we can do an episode on habit breaking too, because it's
Well, and
so.
I was just gonna say, right? Like, a lot of this comes down to a mindset change,
Yeah.
that we need to start dealing with this as a problem of addiction.
Yes. Yes.
Right? We are addicted to our phones. We are addicted to food. We are addicted to these things that are holding us back. And that's the problem, is if we don't start dealing with them as if they are an addiction problem instead of I don't have any self-control. Right? That's the problem. We demonize ourselves for not having the ability to not put these phones down for an hour. Oh, it's so hard. I can't even do it. But instead, we need to learn that these companies have done this to us. And the fact of the matter is that if you're not aware that it's happening, no, you can't make those changes. It would be almost impossible because they've engineered it to do this to us.
Yeah, it's
Right?
worth thinking about.
And that's absolutely. And I think that's kind of the next episode maybe would be just the science of addiction, and like even the revenge addiction. You know, a lot of these things that we do are just parts of our brain that get this reward system engaged. And so it becomes a feedback loop problem. Right?
Yeah.
We enjoy doing it because our brain tells us so, whether it's something that's good for us or not. Right? And so we just want to keep reinforcing that loop.
Exactly. Okay, well, I think on that note, I think that is a good place to wrap up here. Thank you very much for listening.
Good point to move forward on. Eh?
We will move forward. Exactly. We will do an episode on that because I think it's worth talking about for sure.
It's going to be an ongoing. I'm pretty sure addiction is going to be one of our ongoing themes for this, because I think that really underlies a lot of where we're having issues lately. Is just addiction issues. So,
absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe to get every single new episode each and every week. If you'd like to send us some feedback, you can send us an email, thesubvert@hologramradio.org. We're on social media, the Subvert Pod on Twitter and Facebook and pretty much everywhere these days. Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, that's it for this week. We'll see you next time.